Hi there, my name is Chloe Cerino and I'm a registered dietitian at Balance Eating Disorder Treatment Center. I wanted to spend some time talking about intuitive eating, what it is, and go through the 10 principles a little bit. So intuitive eating has become a buzzword in the more recent years, but the concept of it definitely isn't a new one. Intuitive eating came about in the mid-1990s when the first book about intuitive eating was published by two registered dietitians. It's been called the anti-diet or the opposite of dieting, and that really does have some reality to it. Well, dieting is really focusing on taking rules or external tips or tricks to guide our food intake and to tell us maybe when we should be hungry or when we should be full. Intuitive eating really urges people to look inward and get back in touch with their intuitive signals of hunger, fullness, and satiety. So rather than looking to the outside or a so-called expert to tell us when we should eat and when we should stop eating, intuitive eating really turns that back around and says, we innately and intuitively do know when to feed our bodies when we're hungry, and we do know when to stop when we're feeling satisfied or full. So there are 10 principles to intuitive eating, and I wanted to go through each of those in a little bit of detail here today. So the first principle of intuitive eating is to reject the diet mentality. The authors of the book really encourage readers to get mad at diet culture and all of the lies that it told you. So diet culture is just constantly in our ear telling us if you follow a certain diet or eat a particular kind of way that you could lose weight, change your body shape or size, a ton of different benefits that they say will come from following a specific diet. When in reality, we know that diets don't work, especially in the long term. So this first step here is really to say, I'm done with diet culture and I'm done with dieting and I'm ready to try something new, and that something is intuitive eating. The second principle of intuitive eating is to honor your hunger. So this step is one that can be really scary to a lot of newcomers because we often hear them say that they're afraid once they start honoring their hunger and feeding themselves when they're hungry, that they'll become insatiable and won't know when to stop eating. This step is a really important one in rebuilding that trust with your body. So yes, when you do start intuitive eating, you might start feeling hungrier than you have been. And this is only because your body knows now that when you are hungry, it has permission to ask for food. So this really does help, as I said, rebuild that trust with the body to tell it that when it's hungry, it will be fed and it will be fed enough. Third principle of intuitive eating is to make peace with food. So this step really talks about giving yourself unconditional permission to eat. We find that when you are constantly battling against cravings or even just regular feelings of hunger, it can lead to feeling out of control around food, which sometimes can even cause a binge later. So like we talked about in principle number 2, people sometimes are concerned that when they start honoring their hunger, they will feel insatiable and won't know when to stop eating. This one really comes into play here because we know that when you've made peace with food and given yourself permission to eat when you are hungry, that feeling of out of control really will not be a part of your life once you're an intuitive eater. You'll find that once you're hungry, you eat, and once you're full or satisfied, that you stop. And that's really all there is to it. Principle number 4 is to challenge the food police. So the food police is that voice in your head that's constantly saying, this food is good and this food is bad. You should eat this food and not that food. So this food police really is contributing nothing valuable to our psyche because we know that no foods really have any moral value. So once we start challenging this food police and telling it there are no good foods, no bad foods, and I can eat whatever my body is hungry for, we really can get in touch with our satisfaction factor as well as feeding our bodies when we're hungry and starting to reach a point of stopping when we're feeling full. Principle number 5 is to discover the satisfaction factor. So we've been throwing around the word satisfaction and satiety quite a bit so far. And what satisfaction and satiety really means in terms of intuitive eating is that not only do we feel physical hunger and fullness, but there's also a third innate driver of our food choices, that being satisfaction. So if you think about it, there are sometimes times that we feel physically full maybe, but we're not necessarily satisfied. So a lot of people have this experience sometimes with wanting a dessert or wanting something even though maybe they just had a meal or a snack. A good one to think about in terms of the satisfaction factor is maybe you were at a birthday party or some kind of event and you had a nice meal with friends or family, and then the dessert comes around. So say a birthday cake or ice cream comes out. Even though we might be physically full from that meal we just had, we might say to ourselves, wow, it would be really satisfying to me to have a slice of cake, to have a few scoops of ice cream. And even though we might be eating just past the point of fullness in this scenario, we would feel significantly more satisfied if we gave ourselves permission to have that cake, ice cream, whatever else it might be. So discovering the satisfaction factor is so important here, because if we're not giving our bodies the foods that it wants, we might still feel a little bit like we're still missing something and we still want to eat even though we're physically full. So allowing yourself to eat to a point of not only fullness, but also satisfaction is really helpful in getting in touch with all of those cues and reaching a point of intuitive eating. Principle number 6 is to respect your fullness. So this step really talks about not only eating when you're hungry, but also trying to stop when you're feeling physically full. This step can be a challenge when you're in early stages of eating disorder recovery. Because you might be on a meal plan that necessitates you eat a certain amount, you might find yourself having to eat past physical fullness, especially at the very beginning. This is completely okay, because we know that when you're in early stages of eating disorder recovery, we can't be full intuitive eaters yet. We need to make sure that our bodies are nourished to the extent that they can be fully physically and mentally healthy before we can really start to use our hunger and fullness cues as a great indicator of when we should eat and when we maybe don't need to eat anymore. So for everybody else, honoring your fullness is really just that. So noticing over the course of the meal, your hunger changing into fullness. So this will happen as you move through the meal. You might find that once you've reached a certain point, you do feel physically full. And if at that point you feel satisfied also, then that means that you've probably had enough for this meal or for this snack, and that you can move on and do something else. Principle number 7 is to cope with emotions with kindness. We know that a certain amount of emotional eating is completely normal. Everybody, every now and then, will eat emotionally, whether that's eating more or eating less than they normally would, because of an emotion that they're experiencing. We just hope that this isn't the only way we have to manage these difficult emotions or unpleasant sensations that might be coming up. This is something you'll work on with your therapist or other treatment team members to really help you build a solid toolbox of ways to navigate through these feelings or emotions that might be coming up. If you do find that you over or under eat when you are experiencing a difficult emotion, that doesn't mean that you failed anything. It just means that there's more work to be done in building that toolbox. So next time you're having a difficult sensation arise for you, you have a full toolbox of ways that you can manage that without having to over or under eat. Principle number 8 is to treat your body with respect. Your size or shape of your body does not reflect how worthy you are of good things, how able you are to be loved, or anything along those lines. Your body size and shape really are just your body size and shape and don't give us much more information about you as a person. Although it's pretty much impossible to love your body 100% of the time, your body does deserve respect. Your body does so many amazing things for you, even just down to being able to digest the food it gives us or walk across the room if that's something you're able to do. It really does deserve to have a certain amount of respect and to be treated with kindness, even if you don't love the way that it looks 100% of the time. Principle number 9 is exercise, feel the difference. So this principle is looking at how exercise can tie into intuitive eating. The way that we really look at movement and exercise as a part of intuitive eating is to find a way that it feels joyful and pleasant to you. So really turning those signals back around instead of listening to diet culture or anyone else saying that you need to exercise a particular amount and it'll change the way that you look and you'll feel a million times better if you just engage in a particular kind of exercise. Just like we're doing with food, turning that back around and saying, what feels good to me when I engage in it? For some people, it's yoga. For some people, it's cycling. It could be any number of things, but really trying to find the one that feels good to you and that we're not doing just to try to change our body shapes or size. And finally, principle number 10 is honor your health through gentle nutrition. This is the last principle of intuitive eating, and we like to say that there's a reason that it comes last. If you are in eating disorder recovery, or even if you're just a long-term dieter, the most important thing in intuitive eating, and really just generally, is to build a healthy relationship with food and to find a place of food freedom. So that's a place where we really do acknowledge that there are no good and bad foods and that all foods fit. With that being said, we do know that different foods do have different nutrient profiles. So that doesn't make one food better than another. It just means one food provides different nutrients than another. So we do want to try to balance this and find a way to honor our health through the foods that we're giving us. This might come a little bit later in the process than the other steps do, but this is definitely something to continue working on with your registered dietitian or the rest of your treatment team when you're in a place that it's safe to do so. So those are the 10 principles of intuitive eating. We have plenty more resources available on our website if you're interested in learning a little bit more about intuitive eating or the 10 principles. We have a few blogs on the topic that'll be linked in the description box below. And on our website, we have a few webinars available that will go through this in a little bit more detail. I also want to tell you about a new intuitive eating group that will be coming up starting sometime in the new year. There's more information on that available on our website as well. Or if you'd like to know more, you're welcome to just get in contact with our admissions team, which you can also do through our website. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you learned a thing